Hello, my name is Simon Green and I work at the University of Leeds. Hugh Jarvis has kindly asked me to do a short talk about a paper that appeared in Journal of EAP earlier this year. The paper concerns the emergent academic writing processes of novice ESL writers, and it offers some insights into the approaches to writing that novice ESL writers may develop, and secondly, issues of the relationship between approach to writing and quality of written product. Just to give you some brief background on the research context, as I said, the research was carried out in Oman. The students that I was working with and studying were all studying on a 3-year BA program run by a British university in conjunction with the Omani Ministry of Education. The program was a BA Educational Studies in TESOL, and it covered areas such as language description, SLA theory, methodology, and so on. Now, central to the students' success on the program was the completion of a sequence of 3,000-word assignments. These all had a roughly similar structure and posed roughly similar demands. They all require the students to explore their classroom practice or their classroom experience and to frame that experience through a critical review of relevant literature in the area. Now, the students on the program entered with roughly IELTS 4.5, which is a pretty low level of English to be starting a British university degree program. They had a diploma level qualification from an Omani teacher training college, but in their studies at the colleges they had never been required to write anything more than a long paragraph in English. They had no experience of research reading or critical reading, no understanding or experience of the kinds of writing that they would be doing on the BA, and little understanding of the academic values and practices of the School of Education within which they were going to be studying. So, with that bearing that in mind, it's clear that the completion of these assignments was a major challenge to the students concerned. And this research started from my interest in understanding how the students actually set about meeting that challenge, how they set about writing their assignments. Okay, to give you a brief theoretical context, from a situated literacies perspective, academic writing has been constructed as a socially situated practice shaped by academic discourse communities, usually conceived in disciplinary terms, and or by communities of practice, usually conceived in institutional terms, such as a class or a school or whatever. From a socio-cognitive perspective, academic writing has been constructed as a process in which a cognizing individual interacts in complex ways with texts and with other people. And there is a third way in which I think academic writing can be usefully constructed, which is this. In my view, academic writing needs to be constructed on 2 levels. It's always an activity directed towards the production of a text, but it is also always, at least potentially, an activity directed towards transformation of knowledge about the production of text. So there's always a level of producing a text, but there's another level that is about learning about the production of text. And I would argue that in any actual act of academic writing, these two things are going on. There are, however, a couple of areas which are under-researched and which I try to explore in this paper. Firstly, although there is a substantial body of research into the ways in which academic literacies are constructed, and there is now a fair body of socio-cognitive case study research which implicates a wide range of textual and interpersonal interactions in this process, there's been relatively little research into the ways novice ESL writers might shape certain patterns of textual and interpersonal interaction into distinct approaches to academic writing. So that's the first area of interest in this paper, is approaches to writing. There has been a fair amount of research in UK contexts. Torrance et al. 2000, in a large-scale longitudinal and cross-sectional study with undergraduates in the UK, identified 4 main approaches to academic writing. One, which they called detailed planning, with an emphasis on pre-draft planning, so outlining, and some other form of planning like brainstorming or mind mapping or something like that. A contrasting approach which involved briefly outlining and then developing ideas through drafting. And then 2 others which they called minimal drafting and think and then do. The last one involved no actual written planning, but some reflection followed by drafting. The minimal drafting approach really didn't seem to involve very much planning or very much drafting either. I was interested to see if the novice ESL writers that I was working with would develop approaches similar to these or possibly different approaches. The second gap, or the second issue, concerns the approach between approach to writing and quality of writing. I referred earlier to my view that writing needs to be constructed at 2 levels, that any act of writing is both a process of producing a text, but it's also, at least potentially, a process of transforming knowledge about the production of text. And I think this issue of the relationship of quality of writing to approach of writing needs to be thought of and constructed on those 2 levels. So at the level of text production, I would say if there is a consensus in the EAP literature or the process writing literature or the learning and communication strategies literature, I would say that it is that a successful writer, a successful academic writer certainly, is somebody who breaks a complex cognitive task down into manageable steps, planning, drafting, editing, etc., and invests significant amounts of effort in a planning stage. I would say the perception that I notice is that good writers are seen to be good planners. Now, this does actually raise the question as to why this should be so. If we take Torrance's the 2 main approaches that he and his colleagues identified in Torrance et al. 2000, one is a planning approach, the other is much more like a drafting approach. And why is it that the planning approach is the one that seems to lead to successful writing? Okay, at the level of knowledge transformation, there is ample evidence in the literature that writing can help writers transform their understandings of their subject matter, of their audience, of the community within which they are writing, and their understanding of the writing process itself. Potentially it can do. That is fairly well evidenced. What is actually less evidenced is the extent to which and the ways in which novice writers might proactively build into their writing processes textual or interpersonal interactions from which they can actually learn about writing. And that was an area that concerned me in this study. There are clues in the literature. Havela 2004, for example, highlights two practices. One is mining a text for genre or for genre information or lexicogrammatical information, and the other is a process of writerly reading in which one reads but with an eye to a writer's rhetorical choices. Okay, so just to give you some brief information about the research procedure. As I said, it was a longitudinal case study. Data were gathered over the period of a year, structured in 3 phases relating to 3 3,000-word assignments that the participants had to write. The main tools that I used were a spoken recorded diary. Each of the participants was asked to record on a microcassette tape player an entry for each day on which they actually did some work, any work at all, relating to the completion of an assignment. So that could have been chatting with a colleague about it, trying to sort out a class to observe in a school, finding some reading, thinking about reading, planning, drafting, anything at all had to be noted in daily entries in this spoken diary. The diary was complemented by a sequence of semi-structured interviews, and the data gathered from these 2 sources was cross-referenced against other sources like tutorial notes, texts of various kinds, email correspondence, draft material, final assignments, mark sheets, and so on. Now, the data were all analysed using standard qualitative analysis techniques, but the analysis was guided by categories from the literature, which were textual and interpersonal interactions. Now, the analysed data showed a wide range of textual interactions. The participants looked at assignment rubrics, assessment criteria, sample assignments, modular literature, handouts of various kinds, and so on, and also a wide range of interpersonal interactions, interactions with me, their tutor, interactions with each other in class, interactions informally, interactions with other people, with family members, all of which had some part to play in their eventual completion of these assignments. Having given you that brief intro to the research, I'd like to go through now the main findings of the research as they were reported in the paper. Firstly, the study certainly confirms the view of academic writing as a complex socio-cognitive process involving interactions with text and with people, with a wide range of text and a wide range of people in various ways. And it offers many points of correspondence with other similar socio-cognitive studies in the field. There are, however, things that this particular research does offer that I think are noteworthy. The first is that through their textual and interpersonal interactions, the participants did develop, at least 2 of the participants did develop distinct approaches to academic writing. And these were broadly similar to 2 of the approaches identified by Torrance et al. 2000. One of the participants developed as a planner. She actually found during the first assignment that she had to write that outlining was a major problem. It caused her quite serious concern. She couldn't get it right. But by the time she'd finished it, by the time she'd finished her first assignment, she actually felt very positively about planning. In her subsequent assignments, she developed increasingly sophisticated ways of planning. By the time she completed her third assignment, she was using schedules and mind maps and outlines and wall charts and a range of other tools in order to plan. Now for her, planning was clearly the locus for the construction of her ideas. When she came to drafting, it was simply a matter of transferring information from one form into another. Drafting was not a locus for developing ideas. Now, another of the participants developed in completely the opposite way. She also found outlining during the first assignment extremely difficult, and it seemed to give her a mental block. She was actually much happier once she could pass that outlining phase and start writing. And in fact, in her second and third assignments, she developed an approach which involved brief outlining, but essentially a minimal sketch of ideas, followed by recursive, repeated, and painstaking drafting. Now, for her, clearly the locus for the construction of her ideas was in the drafting stage. Writing was the process through which she developed and articulated her ideas. The study also offers insights into the relationship of approach to writing and quality of writing. Both the planner and the drafter reported earlier were very successful writers. They both achieved marks for their assignments in the A and B bands. The three assignments that they wrote when I was studying them achieved either an A or a B. Their eventual degree classifications were very good. The planner achieved a 2-1 and the drafter achieved a first. So this strongly suggests that A, they were both successful academic writers, but secondly, that their different approaches can equally lead to successful writing. My conclusion at the end was that what really mattered was not so much the particular process that the writer adopts. It can be a planning approach, it can be a drafting approach, but really it's the amount of time and effort that the writer is prepared to invest in making whatever approach is chosen work. The planner writer was prepared to invest significant amounts of time in planning. The drafter was prepared to invest significant amounts of time in drafting, and so their approaches paid off for both of them. The study also offers insights into the ways novice writers build into their processes specific kinds of textual or interpersonal interaction from which they can learn. For example, one of the two most successful participants developed very extensive networks with her peers, and she would work with her peers to talk through concepts, to compare drafts, to read they would read each other's work, and so on. And for her, this network of people seemed to be extremely important in her process. Now, that was only one of the participants. The two other participants didn't particularly interact with other students very much. They interacted with their tutor, me, a lot, but not particularly with other students. However, clearly it does show that for some students, peer interactions can be very, very important. What characterised the two most successful participants, though, was a willingness to learn from their reading. Both of the two most successful participants approached what they had to read with an eye to meaning and an eye to form. They both deliberately mined the literature that they had to read for information about text structure, specific grammatical structures, lexical formulae, chunks that they could use, and so on. And this was noticeable that the least successful participant, who did succeed in the program, she got a 2-2, but her approach to reading rather, was entirely to do with extracting information for the assignment. She actually seemed not to want to pick up new phrases or new structures or to acquire new information about texts. Okay, so that's a brief overview of the paper that appeared in JEEP earlier this year. I hope it's been interesting, informative. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.